Day 1. One minute, I was enjoying a peaceful hike through the mountains on one of the most beautiful days that I'd ever seen. And the next, I awoke inside of a dark, musty pit with no idea how I even got there. All at once, I regained consciousness and I started nervously studying the surroundings. It was nearly pitch black aside from a faint light shining down from above me. I tried to shake away the disorientation and focus. My eyes caught a glimpse of light, slowly following it upwards towards the source. The moment that I looked up, my head was flooded by shattered memories of the events that led up to me being in the pit. I remember taking a step, tripping and then quickly falling. But that's all my mind was allowed to remember. I decided to look back down at my body, but I quickly regretted the decision. The pain violently attacked me as the shock faded away. I saw that my leg was twisted and contorted in ways that aren't normally possible. Even though it was resting on the flat ground, my foot was turned nearly all the way around. The bloodied tips of both of my leg bones protruded out through the skin on either side. It's kind of funny how shock affects your mind, because it took me quite some time to mentally accept the fact that my leg was completely broken and useless. I tried to twist and turn, but I couldn't. I mustered all my remaining strength and I attempted to roll over, but I was stopped by the unbearable pain pulsing throughout my entire body. However, it wasn't only the pain that prevented me from turning. I had been so focused on my leg and trying to move that I had failed to even notice when my arm wasn't moving. I craned my neck to see what the problem was, and I found that my arm was completely impaled by a thick tree root. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was when all the pain receptors literally exploded inside of my brain. It was beyond unbearable. Every little twitch of my body was met swiftly by a soul-draining, excruciating sharp pain. Eventually, I stopped fighting and I slowly started accepting my fate. Once I was capable of processing even a small rational thought, I returned my focus to figuring out where the hell I was. I could see a small sliver of sky from where the light shone in, but everything else was obscure. The hole at the top must have been 20 to 30 feet or so above me. I screamed out for someone, anyone, to find me. My desperate pleas were only met with silence. I tried to envision some sort of plan that might allow me to escape, but I was still trapped. The true reality of the situation soon served me another gut punch. Hopelessly writhing in pain, unable to move more than an inch or two, I found myself embracing the thought of death. I tried not to look at the mangled limbs of my body, because every time I did, I would feel even more helpless. Hours passed and the daylight faded, slowly blanketing the pit in darkness. I continued to stare up, falsely hoping that some passerby would see the hole and send their help. They never came. Once nighttime was in full swing, the moon provided a faint light into the cavern. My eyes adjusted to the low lighting, and I nervously scanned around the entire perimeter. The pain was much too severe for me to fall asleep. Foolishly, I hadn't even checked my pockets before that moment. I suppose the stress had pushed away all logical thoughts. My free hand fumbled its way down towards my pocket. A sense of joy swept me up when my fingers felt the shape of my phone. I shifted just enough to pry the phone out and I quickly tapped the screen. The excitement was short-lived though. The phone screen was smashed and I couldn't even get it to turn on. That was the spike that drove itself the deepest into my sense of hope. I dropped the useless phone to the ground and I returned once more to the abyss of my own despair and hopelessness. I tried my absolute best not to give up, but the desire was overwhelming. I placed my head down on the wet dirt and I stared up at the small window outside of the dark cavern. I'm not sure if you could really call it sleep or if it was the fact that the pain won the battle, but I eventually somehow drifted off that night. I awoke suddenly to the feeling of an uncomfortable sensation. Something was brushing the leg that wasn't mangled. The feeling was tickling the hairs all the way up to my thigh. I squinted, trying to see what was brushing against me, but I couldn't see anything through the darkness. Yet I could still feel it. It was like 1,000 little feathers lightly rubbing my skin. I cautiously reached to my side, making sure not to make any sudden movements. I grabbed the phone and I angled it so that the light from the moon could reflect off the screen. However, the light was much too weak to illuminate the darkness. I thought for a moment, all of a sudden remembering the feeling of something else in my pocket. My fingers traced back down my pants and finding the pocket once more. I fumbled around until I felt it. The shape and feel of it caused me to smile. I pulled the lighter out and I thumbed it on. The flickering orange light lit a small portion of the cavern. I moved it all around, but I saw nothing touching my leg. I shifted my good leg up into a rock and I dismissed the feeling as paranoia. Somehow I managed to fall back asleep and I didn't wake up until the first light of day. Day 2. There's not much to say about the daytime. I mean, obviously I couldn't do anything other than lay there helplessly wishing to be rescued. Hell, most of the day I shouted until my throat was sore. Yet again, no one came to my rescue. The nighttime returned, but the moon was a lot brighter that night, filling the pit with a pale blue. Within moments of the sun setting, I began to hear rustling noises all around the pit. The noise was very faint at first, but became increasingly louder as time passed. Every time I heard the sound, I flicked the light around, but nothing moved. At that point, I really started to assume that I was full-on delusional. Maybe the pain had won. The tickling sensation returned just as I was dozing off, though. However, that night, I had the cigarette lighter already clenched in my hand. I waited a few moments to make sure that I was actually feeling something, before striking the lighter. When I did finally strike it, I caught a glimpse of a horrifying scene. Scattered all across my legs were hundreds of little spiders. There was an entire swarm of them crawling onto my leg from the ground. Even with the small flame illuminating the cavern, they continued on my leg. I thrashed my body as much as I could. The little spiders slid off, but they instantly returned. I tried to spit on them, but they seemed to be undeterred by anything that I did. Honestly, I was petrified at that moment. I fought and fought, trying to shake the little bastards off me. As I was trying to do everything possible to get rid of them, I heard another noise from deeper within the cavern. A ticking noise. It was a lot louder than the sounds of the tiny spiders swarming towards me. Even crazier was the fact that they all disappeared upon hearing the same sound that I had. I thumbed the lighter and I swung it around the pit. Nothing. Absolutely nothing showed itself. My eyes tracked down the broken leg and I found hundreds of little pinholes bored into the flesh. The holes were tiny and shallow, much like being pricked by a small needle. I went into a full panic at that point. I tried to pull my arm from the tree root. I pulled on it so hard that I heard a loud snap, and the sound was followed by the arm going completely numb. The numbing feeling eventually gave way to more searing pain. I clutched my shoulder with the other arm and I gently rocked back and forth, trying not to scream out in agony. Once the pain subsided, my attention returned to whatever was inside of the cavern with me. The pit had returned once more to a state of eerie silence. I flicked the lighter wheel every few minutes, but I continued to see nothing stirring in the hole. I stared all around the cavern, trying my best to catch a glimpse of anything moving. Hours passed by me and all was silent. I must have lit the lighter 100 times since I had first found it. I gained a false sense of security and I allowed myself to relax as much as I could. I didn't sleep from the overwhelming paranoia, but I at least stopped staring into the shadows for a while. And then that ticking noise returned. The strange sound came from right behind where my head was resting. I rolled my eyes all the way up, trying my best to look behind me. Given the position that I was trapped in, I was unable to see anything other than the dirt floor of the cavern. I held the lighter above my head, moving it back and forth trying to scare away whatever was there. Suddenly I felt an uncomfortable tingling on my scalp. The feeling was like several needles being lightly pressed against the skin. I swung the lighter to where the feeling was on my head. The moment my hand came near the spot, a sharp burning sensation swept across my head. My entire body ached as the sharp pain crawled across. Hours later, it stopped burning as my skin turned numb. Day 3. My eyes opened in a rush. I didn't even remember falling asleep last night. I felt a cold, clammy sweat dripping off of me. At first, I had no idea what time of day it was. I looked up, finding the setting sun inching across the sky through the opening at the top. I tried to remember falling asleep the night before, but I couldn't retrieve a single memory. As I laid there, swimming in my own confusion, I caught a whiff of a horrible odor. Only one word can accurately describe such a smell: death. The entire cavern was filled with the smell of rotten flesh and the onslaught of slow decay. My nose was able to finally track down the putrid odor. I leaned my head down and stared at the twisted leg through the failing sunlight. The skin had turned black and bloody mucus was oozing from all the wounds. It looked as if the skin itself was crawling away from the severed bones. I thumbed the cigarette lighter and I held it close to my leg. Thousands of tiny spiders were busy scurrying in and out of the exposed wounds. I wildly swung the flame over the top of my leg, yet they continued swarming across my skin. I flinched and flailed, trying to make them scatter. Nothing worked, as they continued steadfast in the assault of my body. The smell of my own rotten flesh, coupled with the sight of the insects crawling out of my skin, was more than nauseating. If I had anything in my stomach at that time, I surely would have vomited every bit of it onto the ground next to me. I watched in silent fear as the sun continued to disappear from overhead. My body trembled at the thought of darkness filling the cavern once again. As soon as the light had completely faded away, I constantly struck the lighter to ward off the unknown assailant from the previous night. The hairs on my body twitched the moment that the sound returned. My eyes darted back and forth across the darkness. The sound wasn't from behind me at that time. It sounded like it was coming from where my feet were resting on the ground. Just like the night before, the tiny spiders retreated back into the darkness. It continued moving closer to my body. Even with the flame from the lighter, I still couldn't see anything in the shadows. I remained completely still, trying not to agitate whatever was out there. I slowly slid my hand closer to where my legs were settled. The small light flickered with each movement. Just outside of the light's reach, I saw something move. It was creeping methodically closer to my body. A long appendage entered just inside of the circle of light and tapped on the ground next to my leg, making the sound that had haunted me every night. I felt an itching sensation cross my good foot. I was overwhelmed by the desire to scratch the intense itch. Yet I clenched my teeth and I dared not to move an inch. The flame from the lighter went out, leaving me once again inside of the darkness. I flicked it again and again, but the light didn't start back. The smell of butane reached my nose, signaling the lighter's death. I frantically spun the wheel of the lighter until my thumb burned from skinning across the metal. Just as the noise was almost at my body, the flame erupted out from the tip of the lighter. Something sprang past the small flame and landed onto my neck. Its needle-like legs pierced into my flesh. I felt it raise up and then thrust itself against my neck. A sharp pain pulsated through my throat and everything instantly went black. I don't know anymore. My eyes once again opened sometime much later, but to find a much different sight. I squinted from the bright light that was centered above my face. Reality grabbed me and I found myself lying in a hospital bed. The broken leg ached as I came back into consciousness. I reached a hand down to feel it, but only felt the sheets of the bed. I finally mustered up enough courage to look down, finding that the bed sheets were flat where the outline of my leg should have been. I finally broke, psychologically that is. I cried for the first time in my adult life. My loud sobs caused the doctor to come into the room. He calmed me down and explained that I had been found by another hiker. He let me know that when I arrived at the hospital, I was within an inch of life, and that the leg could not be saved. As he was talking, I remembered feeling the pain in my neck. Foolishly, I reached a hand up and I brushed my face. My fingers were met with the feeling of the rigid gauze in a face that didn't feel normal. I screamed and cursed so much that the doctor finally gave in and he handed me a mirror. The person in the reflection didn't look like me at all. Half of my neck was missing along with the bottom part of one side of the jaw. After seeing the monstrosity that I had become, I asked the doctor what had caused me to become so deformed. As he spoke, I somehow felt the little spiders creeping along my leg that wasn't even there anymore. The tickling sensation started at the foot and crawled up my entire body. He managed to utter out one syllable. Spider. Before the memories of that petrifying sound swarmed my brain again.